وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبعد. Alhamdulillah, ya akhwan, I am thankful to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala for the opportunity to speak today about a topic of the utmost importance, and that is the importance of an Islamic library. And wallahi, ya akhwan, in these days, one of the things you commonly hear from the people is that no one reads anymore. I hear this so much. No one reads anymore. People don't have the patience, focus to read anymore. But alhamdulillah, we are thankful to Allah ta'ala that here we are in one of the houses of Allah ta'ala talking about the opening of an Islamic library. And it is a ni'mah from Allah ta'ala, as we will talk about this evening bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And I wanted to talk first and foremost, ya ikhwan, about the great love of kutub, of books in general, among those who have preceded us from the scholars of al-Islam, the great concern that they placed upon kutub. And then of course I want to talk more closely, or more specifically, about the importance of building an Islamic library. So we begin, ikhwan, with the narration of Az-Zubayr ibn Bakkar. Az-Zubayr ibn Bakkar, قالت ابنة لأختي لأهلنا، يعني زوجته، خالي خير رجل لأهله، لا يتخذ ضرا ولا يشتري جارية. So in the narration, ikhwan, it mentions that Az-Zubayr ibn Bakkar, he said his niece said to his family, meaning his wife, my uncle is such a good man. Such a good man my uncle is that he does not take a co-wife, nor does he buy a slave girl. He's focused on his family, according to the niece. And then it mentions, ikhwan, قال تقول المرأة يعني زوجته, but then his wife said, والله لهذه الكتب أشد علي من 3 ذرائر. She said, by Allah, these books are harder on me than 3 co-wives. So this, ikhwan, la fikum, we see the niece is bragging about how good her uncle is, doesn't take another wife. But his wife would rather he had 3 other co-wives than all of those books that he concerned himself with day and night. And this is what we find, ikhwan, from the concern of the Salaf, from the concern of the scholars of the past, as it relates to books. They became more beloved to them than the whole of the dunya and everything in it. وقال الشقيق بن إبراهيم البلخي قلنا لعبد الله بن مبارك إذا صليت معنا لما لا تجلس معنا. So it mentions, ikhwan, the Shaqiq ibn Ibrahim, he said to Abdullah ibn Mubarak, why is it that when you pray with us you don't stay and sit with us? You pray and you leave. You don't spend any time sitting with us. قال أذهب فأجلس مع التابعين والصحابة. He said, well, I go and sit with the tabi'in and the sahaba. So of course the sahaba have passed, they're gone. So the question that the narrator asked, قلنا فأين التابعون والصحابة? Well, where are the tabi'un and the sahaba? And he said, قال أذهب أنظر في علمي فأدرك آثارهم وأعمالهم وما أصنع معكم أنتم تجلسون تغتابون الناس. Ibn Mubarak said, ikhwan, he said, I go and look at my knowledge, and what was intended by ilm here are books. I go and look at my books so that I can understand their traditions and their deeds, their works, their actions. And what would I do with you? All you do is sit around backbiting people. So he says, ikhwan, I don't have time to gossip. I don't have time to sit around and talk about the people. My concern is the knowledge of the companions. But he said it, ikhwan, I go to be with the companions. I go to be with the companions and the tabi'een. I go to spend time with them. Because the one who is reading in these works, ikhwan, he allows himself to be captivated and captured by these works. It is as if he is walking in that fashion. So this ikhwan was Abdullah ibn Mubarak. And now we look at one of our more recent scholars, the great scholar Al-Allama Hamad al-Ansari. And anyone who knows Hamad al-Ansari, ikhwan, they know that Sheikh Hamad went around the dunya, ikhwan, traveling to get the manuscripts, the rare books and manuscripts for his library in Al-Medina. He was known for this, ikhwan. Anyone who has had the opportunity to visit his library in Al-Medina, they will find min al-nawadir, from the rare works of Al-Islam. And this is something he spent many years doing. And I'll mention some narrations in a moment and he support that. Shaykh Hamad al-Ansari, he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, al-kutubu indi afdal min qusur al-muluk. He said, books are better to me than the palaces of kings. Now this is a person, ikhwan, who is not concerned with a spacious home and not concerned, ikhwan, with fine carpets or chandeliers or all of these things. He says to him, ikhwan, books are more precious than the palaces of kings. And that is, ikhwan, if you gave a person the opportunity to choose between a large library or a palatial home, what do you think most people would choose? A palatial home. But that's why the people like Hamad al-Ansari are rare. Men like Hamad al-Ansari, rahimahullah, are rare. Because he is a man who put the kutub, the knowledge, the ilm, over the affairs of the dunya. More concerned with the ilm, the knowledge, than the affairs of the dunya. He also said, ikhwan, rahimahullah ta'ala, listen to this, ikhwan. أول ما قدمت إلى هذه الديار السعودية كان معي مال كثير أنفقته كله في شراء الكتب حتى لم يبقى معي شيء منه. He said, ikhwan, when I first arrived in Saudi Arabia, and for those of us who are familiar with the biography of Sheikh Hamad al-Ansari, he made hijrah from Mali in Africa all the way to Al-Medina, part of it on foot. So this was a tremendous story, his biography and his making hijrah to Al-Medina. And he says that when I first arrived in Saudi Arabia, I had a lot of money with me that I spent entirely on buying books until I had nothing left. So here's someone, ikhwan, again, who was concerned, focused on the purchasing of books, the lifeline, the lifeblood of the person who seeks knowledge, and the one who was concerned with knowledge, spending his last on kutub. Now, ikhwan, a person will say to you, yeah, but Abul Hasan, there's nothing wrong with buying shoes. There's nothing wrong with buying nice clothes. There's nothing wrong with buying fine furniture and the likes of this. And I say to him, of course, there's no harm in that. But again, that is the difference between you and Hamad al-Ansari. That is the difference between you and the ulama of Islam, who are not concerned with the affairs of the dunya, the likes of Shaykhuna Shaykh Muqbil, the likes of Shaykhuna Shaykh Rabi', the likes of Hamad al-Ansari, and other than them that we will mention bi'idhnillahi ta'ala tonight. So that is the difference. That Shaykh Hamad al-Ansari mentioned, ikhwan, he came with a lot of money and spent all of it in the path of buying kutub. And then Shaykh Hamad al-Ansari, he also said, ikhwan, showing again the fadl, the virtue of his library, that by the way, ikhwan, that he would leave open for the students of knowledge to benefit from. They could go in, they could sit, they could learn, they could research. And he says, ikhwan, لا أعرف مكتبة الآن تفتح في الصباح إلى المساء إلا هذه المكتبة. He said, I don't know of any library currently that opens from the morning until the evening except for this library. Leaving the library open, ikhwan, for the people to come and to benefit, to sit and to learn from the books of Al-Islam, whether it be in tafsir, or whether it be in fiqh, or whether it be in hadith, or whether it be in seerah, whatever it may be, ikhwan, the students of knowledge able to come and benefit from these works. And that is the importance of having an Islamic library, where the people can come and they can benefit. They can come and they can research. For not everyone, ikhwan, has the money to be able to build for themselves a large library that has in it all of the works of aqeedah and tawheed and other than that. And so therefore the ability to go and to benefit in an Islamic library, we see the benefit of that in the statement of Shaykh Hamad al-Ansari, rahimahullah ta'ala. And now I wanted to bring from the biography of Sheikh Al-Albani, Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, because as we know, Ikhwan, perhaps no one benefited from a library like Sheikh Al-Albani. Al-Zahiriyah in Dimashq. The Zahiri library there in Damascus, in Syria. And we know that Sheikh Al-Albani, his father, made hijrah from Shkodra, from Albania to Syria. And Sheikh Al-Albani was from those who benefited from an Islamic library. But before benefiting from the library, I want to show you that not everybody starts on the correct path of seeking knowledge. Sheikh Al-Albani included. And he mentions this in his biography leading up to his study of hadith in Al-Zahiriyah. He says, فَقَدْ تَخَرَّجْتُ مِنَ الْمَدْرَسَةِ النِّظَامِيَّةِ الْإِبْتِدَائِيَّةِ فَقَط. I only graduated from primary school. We say elementary school here, right? So Al-Albani actually did not go beyond elementary school. And in some of his biographies, he mentions, some of his memoirs, he mentions the 8th grade or like this, but not getting out of elementary school. وكان والدي من فقهاء الحنفية الأقوياء في فقههم والشديدين رحمه الله في تعصبه. My father was one of the strong scholars of the Hanafi jurisprudence, Hanafi school of jurisprudence, and was blindly attached to it. And it was because of his blind attachment that ultimately would be that which would separate between him and his son, Sheikh Muhammad Nasiruddin Al-Albani, rahimahullah ta'ala. It would be his father's ta'assub, his fanatical attachment to the Hanafi madhab that would cause this. He says, درست عليه وعلى الطريقة القديمة شيئا من الفقه الحنفي. So he says that I studied in the old-fashioned way, in the old ways. Not like we find today when everything is Google this, and in the old ways of studying, in the kutub, in the works, in the books. وبعض الكتب في علم الصرف الذي هجره العرب والشغل بالنحو فقط. And this is something that I've been talking about for many years. Allah yabarifikum. The Sheikh said I studied with him some books of sarf, Arabic morphology. And sarf, ikhwan, is ilm binyat al-kalima. It is the knowledge of the structure of words, how words are formed and structured from Arabic root words and stems. For example, fa'ala, kataba, like this. And so the Shaykh, he says here, Allah barifikum, that he studied with his father something of the science of morphology, Arabic morphology, he says, of which the Arabs neglected. And it's true, in reality, very few places you can go now and study sarf, specifically sarf. And I remember, Ikhwan, when we were studying, the only reason I had studied sarf way back when in Egypt was because I actually asked the teacher to teach me sarf. But it's rare to find someone who actually focused on the study of sarf. And then the Shaykh, he says after this, لعل الصرف أهم من النحو لأن النحو يقوي الألفاظ فقط. He says after this that I studied again some of the works of sarf with my father. The Arabs neglected because they only focused on grammar. And perhaps morphology is more important than grammar, because grammar only strengthens the articulation of the words. Now what is intended by that, ikhwan, when you study nahw, when you study grammar, you are concerned with awakhir al-kalimat. You are concerned with the endings of words, how the words end, because of those awamil, those modifiers that modify those words. But when you study sarf again, you're concerned with the beginning and the middle of the word, the very structure of the word itself. And not only the structure, but its meaning. The structure of the word and its meaning. And so therefore, the Shaykh is saying that perhaps it is even more important. Now, of course, if you look in the books of sarf from the Qudama, from the earliest scholars of sarf, you will find that sometimes they would say that because sarf, they consider sarf to be more difficult, then they would put nahr before it, and some would put sarf before it, and some would say they should be taught together. At any rate, Sheikh Al-Albani, this is his position and his statement regarding the study of as-sarf. الشاهد درست عليه وعلى بعض المشايخ الآخرين شيئا من النحو والبلاغة. he said, what is important, or the highlighting point here, is that I studied with him and some other scholars. Now, this is a clear refutation on those who claim that Shaykh al-Albani, rahimahullah ta'ala, did not have teachers. First and foremost, as he mentioned, his father was a scholar of the Hanafi school of jurisprudence. So his father was one of his first teachers. And also he studied with other scholars from the associates in the Zumala, the colleagues of his father, along with other teachers there in Damascus. And so therefore Shaykh al-Albani has shuyukh, he has teachers. So this is a clear refutation upon those who claim that Shaykh al-Albani did not have teachers. As for having a university education, then no, this is not the case. As Shaykh al-Albani mentioned, he did not finish elementary school. But however, Ikhwan, what is interesting is Shaykh al-Albani goes on to teach in the Islamic university. So though he did not go through the university went through him. Even though he did not go through the university went through him. What do I mean by that? Students had to study at the feet of al-Albani in the school. So the Shaykh, he says, after he studied with his father and some of the mashayikh there, something from grammar and al-balagha, rhetoric. And I'm going to get to the highlighting point about the library in a moment, Ikhwan. I want to give this background is important. لكنني لم أستمر في ذلك كما هو شأن الطلبة قديما. He said, but I did not continue in that fashion as was the custom of the students in the past. He says, وجدت نفسي منصرفا إلى دراسة كتب غريبة علي الآن. He said, I found myself beginning to study, drawn to studying books and reading books.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
نعم. So the Shaykh, he mentions here, Ikhwan, rahimahullah ta'ala, I found myself drawn to studying books strange to me now. قصص خيالية, قصة عنترة ابن شداد, وقصة ذات الهمة والبطال, يعني fantasy stories, storybooks, fantasy stories. He was drawn to those early on. As I mentioned, Ikhwan, so we see how a person may start off in one direction, and by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they may end up in the right direction. These fantasy stories of Antara ibn Shaddad, who was an old poet, and some of the other stories, Ikhwan, storybook kind of stories, heroes and that kind of thing, knights and the whole and that affair. وانتقلت بعد ذلك لدراسة التاريخ. But after that I moved to studying history. والذي يسر لي السبيل شخص مصري. And the person who facilitated that for me was an Egyptian. The one who facilitated that move was an Egyptian. أرسله الله إلى دمشق. Allah caused him to move to Damascus. ولكي يعيش الرجل كان يشتري تركات مكاتب. And as a way of making a living, he used to sell things from offices, old books and office supplies, these kinds of things. And this is how he used to make his money. وعنده دكان أمام المسجد الأكبر هناك مسجد بني أمية. And he had a shop in front of the big masjid there called the Masjid of Bani Umayyah. He had his own shop there. Now this is what the Shaykh mentions. يبعث الكتب على الرصيف للمارة. He would have books scattered all over, strewn about in front of his shop on the sidewalk for passers-by. So people pass by, got books all over the place on the sidewalk. And Shaykh al-Albani said, وَفِيهَا كُتُبْ أَشْكَالًا وَأَلْوَانًا. Different types of books, different colors, all kinds of different books out there. Right? A number of different works. يبعثر هذه الكتب فيها الصالح والطالح كما يقال عندنا في دمشق. And the Shaykh then he gives us something of an idiomatic expression from where he was from when he was living in Damascus. He said these books contain everything, basically the good and the bad, the wicked and the righteous, right? As we used to say in Damascus. So these books, all kinds of books out there. Books of deen, books of religion, all kinds of stuff out there, the Shaykh he mentions. And then the Shaykh he goes on to say, وَمَا هَذِي الْكُتُبْ يُبَعْثِرُهَا. He says, so as for all these books, everyone kind of found the books that they liked. So whoever was interested in novels, they found novels out there. Whoever was interested in, again, storybooks, they found storybooks out there. And Shaykh al-Albani said that I came upon بعض أجزاء المنار. I came across some issues of Manar magazine. And look what he says after this, إخواننا برفيقكم فانفتح أمامي الطريق ومشيت في طريق الحديث. And he said, when I found those issues of Al-Manar magazine, the path opened up before me and I began to walk the path of hadith, the science of al-hadith. Now what is the shahid? What is the highlighting point of this, ikhwan? One never knows, ikhwan, in the building of a library, that when the student comes there and the student finds, ikhwan, from the works of Ibn Kathir and from the works of Ibn Taymiyyah and from the works of Ibn al-Qayyim, one never knows, ikhwan, that may take that child, that young person, off the path that they were upon, ikhwan, of reading novels or whatever it may be, to the path of seeking knowledge. And the beauty, ikhwan, that Shaykh al-Albani, it was by Allah's grace that he found the works that led him to the science of hadith. Now imagine, ikhwan, the library that is put together by the people of the Sunnah. And now when the student goes in there, ikhwan, he doesn't find kull mahib wa deb, everything, as the Shaykh al-Albani mentioned, every ashkal wa alwan, every shape, type and form and color of book, but rather he finds the works of the Salaf. He finds the works and the narrations of the people of the Salaf. He finds Bukhari and he finds Abu Dawood and he finds Kitab al-Tawheed and Kashf al-Shubahat. He finds the works of the people of the Sunnah, ikhwan, curated by the people of the Sunnah. Curated and gathered together by the people of the Sunnah, and therefore, ikhwan, he doesn't have to stumble through the works and through the books as we find from the likes of Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala. And then the Shaykh says, ثُمَّ شاء الله عز وجل أني تعلمت مهنة الساعات من والدي. And then Allah willed that I would learn to fix watches from my father. Now this becomes important, ikhwan, because it was this skill that allowed Shaykh al-Albani the time to go and study in the library, as we'll go on to read momentarily. But I wanted to make a quick point, ikhwan. Shaykh Rabi, he says that if someone is Salafi, if a person is Salafi in truth, he says, even if they're teaching geology and arithmetic, you will find the Salafi methodology sprinkled in their lessons. Even if it's mathematics, even if it's geography, you're going to find Salafiyya in those lessons somehow, some way. Shaykh al-Albani, ikhwan, with the skills of fixing watches and clocks that he learned from his father, he mentions in his book Jilbab Maratul Muslima, the jilbab or the hijab of the Muslim woman, he mentions that when he used to travel around and he would come into a masjid and he would find, remember those old grandfather clocks? Some of you are too young probably to remember the old grandfather clocks. They used to have the Roman numerals on them for the most part, and they used to have a bell that would sound off at midnight or noon. And Shaykh al-Albani said that when he used to go to these masajid, he said, here we are in the place of sajda, the place of worship of Allah alone, and here we have the signs of the kuffar, because that bell is the sign of the Christians, and calling the people to the prayer. And so Shaykh al-Albani said that what he used to do, he would sit in the masjid and he would go to the mas'uleen, the people responsible for the masjid, and he would say to them, listen, I'm crafted with watches and clocks. And he would teach them how that the gong or the bell of that clock was from the signs of the disbelievers, the Christians. And therefore he would ask them for permission to remove the bell without harming the clock. What's the shahid? The shahid is here, even Shaykh al-Albani used those gifts and their skills to promote tawheed. Even fixing watches ends up being something that he uses in the promotion of it, tawheed, and the removal of those affairs of the disbelievers and imitating the disbelieving people. So the Shaykh, he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, ta'alamtu mihnat as-sa'at min walidi. I learned how to fix watches from my father. وكانت هي السبيل لمكسب قوتي وبه تزوجت وبنيت داري المتواضعة هناك. He said that from the skill of fixing watches, this is how he made his daily bread. This is how he made his money. And also he says, this is how I got married. This allowed me to get married and to build my humble home there in Damascus. لكن كنت حرا, but I was free. Didn't have much. I had a very humble home, he says, but I was free. Free to do what? ولا أزال بفضل الله حر, and by the grace of Allah I'm still free. ذلك من فضل الله علي وعلى الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يشكرون. He says, إخوان الله برفيكم, that this was by the permission of Allah Ta'ala, from the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon him and the people, that Allah had allowed him this time. He says, however, most of the people are not thankful. What does that mean? If you have free time, what do you do with your free time? Allah Ta'ala blesses you to have free time from work, for example, from family duties. Now you have an hour, for example. What do you do with that hour? Do you spend it in the recitation of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do you spend that hour in reading Kitab at-Tawheed? Do you spend that hour in reading Sahih al-Bukhari? Do you spend that hour memorizing a dua? That is being thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving you that free time. That is how you show thanks, by being dutiful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know this from the sunnah. When Aisha said that the Messenger of Allah he used to stand so long in prayer until his ankles would swell up. And she said, you are one, O Messenger of Allah, who your past and future sins are forgiven, and you stand like this? He said, should I not be a thankful servant of Allah? You show thanks from dutifulness, from worship, from good conduct. And here the Shaykh is saying that this is from the free time. It's from the blessings of Allah Ta'ala, but most of the people are not thankful because they waste their time. Now you have this hour. Are you watching a movie? Now you have this hour, are you spending it in gossip? If you are spending it in gossip, all of these other things that we have mentioned, ikhwan, then you are wasteful and you are not thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving you that free time. So Shaykh al-Albani, he says after this, ikhwan, فَكُنْتُ أَعْمَلْ فِي الدُّكَّانِ ساعة أو ساعتين من الوقت استخرج قوت يومي كفافا أغلق الدكان إلى المكتبة الظاهرية. And then the Shaykh, he says, what, ikhwan? That so I used to work in the shop for an hour or two to earn my daily sustenance, to make enough money to provide for my family. That's all. He wanted to make sure he had enough to take care of his household and his family. And look what he says. Then I would close my shop and head straight to the library. I would close my shop and go straight to the Zahiriyya library. Now again, Ikhwan, this shows that the Shaykh is thinking about how his time is organized and how his day is laid out. Okay, so I got to make this much money today. So if I finish this amount of clocks or this amount of watches, then I have made enough to provide for my family for the day. And after that, he would close his shop and go directly to the library. And as we'll see momentarily, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, he would spend the whole rest of the day there. He took care of his family. He wasn't like those individuals, Ikhwan bi'fikum, who think that they're going to go and they're going to study and they're not going to provide for their families. La ya Ikhwan, this is not the way. As Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he mentions in his tremendous work, the narration, in his tremendous work, Al-Jami' li-Akhlaq al-Rawi wa Dab al-Sami', the collection of those narrations of the seekers of hadith, that one of the scholars of the past made rihla. He traveled out in the path to seek knowledge. And when he got there, the sheikh, the teacher, asked him, and what did you leave for your family of provisions? And that student said, nothing. And that teacher said, well, go back and provide for them and then come back and study. So Shaykh al-Albani, rahimahullah ta'ala, here is showing us, Ikhwan, that he would first make sure that he had made enough money for his daily sustenance for him and his family. Then he would close his shop and go straight to the public library, straight to the library there in Damascus. And for time's sake, Ikhwan, because the time is short, we'll skip down a little bit. He goes to the library every day, Ikhwan, and he's studying from the works. And then he begins to go in the section of the library that has the makhtutat, the manuscripts. And again, the reason why this is important, Ikhwan, to that which we're talking about is because, Ikhwan, it is so easy for us now, Ikhwan. We walk into the library, we walk over, we pull down Bukhari off of the shelf, we read it, we benefit. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. We pull down Majmu' al-Fatawa, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, and we benefit from it. Not realizing that someone, Ikhwan, had to go through manuscripts, handwritten manuscripts, and do the dhabt, Ikhwan, to make sure everything was right, that the words were spelled correctly, and that the different words were right in the book, so that the meaning was correct, according to what the Shaykh had written in his work. Somebody had to go through those works, Ikhwan, to make tahqiq of them before, Ikhwan, they were finally typed out and then finally printed until finally they reached your bookshelf in your house. Right, translated, whatever it may be. But the point is, Ikhwan, the Shaykh al-Albani began to spend time in the section of manuscripts there in the Zahiriyya library. He says, أنه يسر لي الانتفاع بمخطوطات الظاهرية. And he said, I was blessed to benefit from the manuscripts there in the Zahiriyya library. Perhaps like no other person, he says, who would work or study or like this in any library in the world. Perhaps. كيف ذلك? How is that possible, he said. هذه المكتبة ارتفاعها نحو. So the Shaykh, he said, the library was like this tall, right, this high. And anyone of you have ever seen a picture of the library there, Ikhwan, so you have imagine these very high ceilings, Ikhwan, those ceilings way up. And you just have rows and rows of books of which you cannot reach except by way of a ladder. Right? You can only reach those books by way of a ladder. So listen to what Shaykh Nasser mentions here. فأنا كنت أضع السلم فأقف على السلم أقلب الكتب لأن هذه الكتب فيها ما هب ودب. So the Shaykh said, so I used to place a ladder there in front of the rows of books, in front of the stacks of books. And I would stand on it and I would flip through the books because these books contained a variety of different types and works. Kul mahab with everything in there, as we said. Now imagine, Ikhwan, these are makhtutat that no one has actually organized and put into any order. They're just makhtutat. Just imagine, Ikhwan, just rows and rows and shelves of books, and no one has actually taken the time to go through them to make sure what's there, what's not there, and put it in any kind of order. Now remember, Shaykh al-Albani, rahimahullah, had what? An elementary school education. This is important. So again, he is educated of course, at the feet of his father and some of the mashaykh there in Damascus. However, Ikhwan, he is one who spent many hours in the library, and therefore, Ikhwan, he is from those, as they say, autodidacts, one who taught himself through the library himself. The Shaykh said after this, Ikhwan, مخطوطات نحن الآن نتكلم عن المخطوطات. I'm now talking about manuscripts. فيها مهب ودب. All different types of topics and subjects, a wide range and variety of topics and subjects. هذا الكتاب كويس سجلته في مسودة. So what the Shaykh would say, okay, here's a book. And what he would do is he would take his notebook, Ikhwan al-Fikum, he would look to see what it was, and then in his notebook he would write down what he had, what was there. Whatever the book was, it was a book of fiqh, whether it was a book of hadith, a book of tafsir, he would write that down, al-Fikum, in his notebook. وَأَنَا عَلَى السُلَّمِ, all the time when he's up on the ladder. So he doesn't have time to bring all these books down, sit them in front of her on a desk and write this stuff out. He's doing this up on a ladder, high off the ground, Ikhwan, working in the books, writing. Now imagine, Ikhwan, he could be doing anything with his day. He didn't have to go to the Zahiri library and do this. This is because of how beloved the science of hadith and how beloved the knowledge of Islam became to him, Ikhwan, that he focused his work on this. So I will be there, he says, on this ladder. Mish mis'ad kahraba'i, not one of those lifts, those electric lifts that they have today, the Sheikh said. You know, they have those electric lifts that they hit the button and it lifts you up. So you can pull, the genie. There it is, the genie. Sheikh said, we ain't had no genies. He's up on a ladder doing all of this work, Ikhwan. Allah barik fikum. He says, مررت على أكثر من 10,000 كتاب حديث. Let me repeat that. He said مررت على أكثر من 10,000 كتاب حديث. By doing this, Ikhwan, he said, I went through more than 10,000 books of hadith. In that fashion. Book by book, page by page, Ikhwan. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? I can't imagine. The dedication that it would take. All we're asking you to do is just go sit in the library and read a little bit. And hear this great Imam. Al-Albani benefits from a library until becoming the Imam of the Dunya. Imam of the Dunya. Because of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and because of his dedication to the study of the religion of Islam. Al-Muhim, the Shaykh says. فبهذه الطريقة مررت على المخطوطات كلها. He says, so I went through all of the manuscripts in this way. سجلت أسماءها في الوقت الذي ممنوع يدخل أحد إلى المكتبة مكتبة المخطوطات. He said, I went through all the manuscripts and recorded their titles at a time when no one was allowed to enter the manuscript section of the library. Sheikh Al-Albani was there so much, Ikhwan, he got a key. They gave the Sheikh a key because he was in the library so much, and to the point, Ikhwan, where nobody was allowed to go into portions of the library, especially the makhtutat, Ikhwan. These are manuscripts, precious manuscripts, handwritten stuff. And here Al-Albani, rahimahullah, nobody's allowed in that room, and here Al-Albani's in there all day and night. So it mentions, Ikhwan, Shaykh Al-Albani, he says, فَأَيُّ إِنسَانْ يُرِيد أَنْ يَدْرُسْ يُقَدِّمْ طَلَبْ. So if somebody wanted to study from the manuscripts, they used to have to actually put forward an official request. They would have to put in an official request for them to actually be able to take out one book, one manuscript at a time. If you were a researcher and you wanted to research in from the research section, you have to put in your official request and they give you a book. Maybe, as we'll see in a second, maybe they give you the book. فيعطى له كتاب واحد فقط. إذا انتهى من دراسة الكتاب قد يؤتونه بكتاب آخر وقد لا يؤتونه. So they would give that person that one book, maybe. And then when he would finish with that one book, and he would request another book, maybe they'd give him that book, maybe they wouldn't. But look what the Shaykh says. أما ربي عز وجل فقد سخر لي الموظفين. As for him, the Shaykh, he says, Allah made things easy for him between him and the employees. He took a liking to the Shaykh, a shine to the Shaykh, as they used to say. The librarians there. وَمِن جُمْلَةِ مَا سَخَرَ اللَّهُ لِي غُرْفَةً مُظْلِمَةً لَا تُرَى الشَّمْسِ لَكِنْ فِيهَا لَمْبَةٌ. Now this is a nice point, Ikhwan. The Shaykh, he says, and among that which Allah facilitated for me was a semi-dark room with no sunlight and one light. Now look what the Shaykh says after this, Ikhwan. لَيْسَتْ كَهَذِهِ الْأَنْبَاتِ الْمُنِيرَ الْآن. Not those the tube lights that we have now, those long tube lights that give off a lot of light. Just a small light bulb. A small light bulb in this big room. So the room was in semi-darkness. The Shaykh is in semi-darkness. So on top of the fact he's up on his ladder struggling, he's in a semi-dark room. And he's doing all of this work, going through thousands of pages of manuscripts. And then the Shaykh says, not again these tube lights that they have today, but rather lamba saghira, a small light bulb. فَأَعْمِلْ فِيهَا نَهَارًا وَلَيْلًا. And I worked in that room like this day and night. Shaykh Al-Albani. An hour or two to provide for his family, and the rest of the time spent in that library, Ikhwan, day and night in the research, in the study, there in the manuscript section of the Zahiriyya library. What is the shahid? What is the highlighting point from all of this, Ikhwan, that a great scholar, the likes of Shaykh Al-Albani, Allah blessed him to reach the level of being from the A'imma, the Imams, the Muhaddith of this Asr, the scholar of Hadith of this era, by spending all of his time in a library, studying, researching, reading, categorizing, as we'll see momentarily, from all of these works. How much time? Can we delay a little bit more? Inshallah. Inshallah. So he mentions after this, Ikhwan, Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, بعد أن انتهيت من هذه المسودة أخذت الأسماء وسجلتها في بطاقات. So after recording this in this notebook or like this, the Shaykh said he then wrote everything out on cards, on small cards. He categorized everything on these small cards. ثم صنفت هذه البطاقات, then he categorized these cards. وجمعتها تحت أسماء مؤلفيها, and then he placed each card under the author's name, placing each card under the author's names. And then he said after this, إخوان كل مؤلف وما له من الكتب ثم وضعت لها فهرسا. And then he said, I placed each book under the author's name, then I created a book index. Now, Ikhwan, for many of us, and me and Sheikh Anwar were talking about this as I was driving up, who remembers the Dewey Decimal System? Where they will put together this system where you could find books in a library. So it will be based on numbers, these numbers and letters together, this kind of code, and then you'll be able to find thousands of books in any one library. Shaykh Al-Albani, Ikhwan, created his own system. Put his own system together, Ikhwan, of thousands of books with an elementary school education. Ikhwan, I cannot pass over the fact that the Shaykh had an elementary school education. So this says a lot, Ikhwan, for those who argue you got to have a degree. I wonder how many people with a degree could have done what Al-Albani did, rahimahullah ta'ala. That's from the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Shaykh then goes on to mention, Ikhwan, that he did this kind of work in stages. المرحلة الأولى سعدت على السلم كتبت الأسماء والعناوين. He said the first stage was to climb up on that ladder, to write down the names of the authors, the titles of the books, and like this. جاء الدور المرحلة الثانية, and then came the second stage, وهو قراءة هذه الكتب. Now you got to read the books, right? You can't just put the system together and categorize it and organize it. Now the Shaykh is reading through thousands of books, Ikhwan, thousands of volumes. Again, Ikhwan, he went through an entire library like this. And so, Ikhwan, when you're listening to Shaykh Al-Albani on those recordings, and you hear him debating with people, or you hear him teaching, and people asking questions, and you hear Shaykh Al-Albani talk, and the man's ittila', Ikhwan, his ability to recall different things from all these different works, whether it be fiqh, or whether it be lugha, or whether it be hadith, or whether it be tafsir. You say, it's amazing how the Shaykh has this recall of all of these different things, and then you remember the work that he put in that library, sitting and studying and reading in those works. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but I do, Ikhwan, I want to read through this last portion, inshallah ta'ala. The brothers can be patient. We can delay Isha a bit. I wanted to read from Shaykhuna Shaykh Muqbil rahimahullah ta'ala as it relates to his advice to the students and the students of knowledge. And there were several different advices that he gave, but I wanted to read one in particular. وينبغي أن يحرص كل الحرص على تكوين مكتبة فننصحه بتكوين مكتبة. The Shaykh said it is necessary, it's a must, to strive diligently to establish a library. This is the advice of Shaykhuna Shaykh Muqbil rahimahullah ta'ala. I advise a student of knowledge, it is a must to strive diligently to establish a library. So we advise him, the student, to establish a library. And this, ikhwan, is because of, as we just seen from Shaykh al-Albani, as we'll see from Shaykhuna Shaykh Muqbil rahimahullah, hopefully in a moment, the importance of returning to these works. And ikhwan, I remember when we in Damaj, and I'm not talking about the Shaykh's personal library in his home, but the library of the Markaz, of the center. And it was expansive, ikhwan. And anyone seen the old pictures of it, yani rows and rows and walls of books in all of the different funun, all of the different sciences. And you would find the people, ikhwan, in there from morning to night. Sometimes, ikhwan, you would see a student of knowledge researching an issue, and you would find around him dozens of books just opened up all around him. And you'll find him with his notebook there, and the books all around him open, and he's moving from book to book, and he's recording benefits from each book in the different sciences and issues. I remember, ikhwan, one year when I was trying to write an explanation, a short little, some ta'liqat on al-Bayquniyah, my own personal little thing I was just trying to do. And I asked one of the researchers there in the library, I was looking for an athar, a narration as an example for one of the sciences from the sciences of hadith. And so I said to him, I'm looking for this athar, this narration, and I can't find it. So I'm thinking now he's just going, tell me what book to go to. He said, you see that row over there? You see that them shelves over there? I said, yeah. He said, pull them all down and start reading them. You'll find it. How can they, ikhwan, like this? In the library. In the library. So he mentions after this, ikhwan, Shaykhuna Shaykh Muqbil, يكون مكتبة من كتب السنة. Let that library be from the books of the Sunnah. As we mentioned earlier, look, when the people of Salafiyya and Sunnah, when they're the ones, ikhwan, to put these libraries together, they're going to put them together from the books of the Sunnah, from Al-Bukhari and from Muslim and Abu Dawood, Ibn Majah, Nisa'i, and other than them, ikhwan, from the kutub of As-Sunnah, ومن كتب الرجال, and from the books of the narrators of hadith, ومن كتب العقيدة, and from the works of creed, ومن كتب الفقه, ومن كتب التفسير, from the works of fiqh and the works of tafsir. So the Shaykh is giving us a blueprint. We should have in our library here, alhamdulillah, all of the different funun, the different sciences. And so if one ikhwan wants to know something about what an ayah means, for example, then he can go to the section of tafsir, looking at Sa'di, looking at Ibn Kathir, looking at Tabari, pull down these works, ikhwan, and begin to study them and read from them. And he says, ikhwan, from the works of Aqidah, from the works of fiqh, from the works of tafsir, ينبغي أن يحرص كل الحرص على أن لا يترك كتابا من كتب المراجع الإسلامية إلا ويكون موجود في مكتبته بحسب القدرة والطاقة. And in the Shaykh he says, one must strive with all due diligence to have all the Islamic reference books in their library to the best of their ability. So now, ikhwan, if we're not able to build our own personal libraries, and let us strive to aid the library here. Let us try to find all of the authentic works, ikhwan, aid the people. If it's putting down some of our wealth or whatever it may be, ikhwan, to make sure that this library, ikhwan, has, as Shaykh Muqbil mentions, it has, ikhwan, those Islamic resources in tafsir, in fiqh, all of those things there for ikhwan, not just ikhwan to necessarily just to be read, but for the researchers. A research library. And now if the people need to do research on a particular topic, they can come to the library, they can come to the library, and they can study in this research library. And they can find from the different works And there's nothing, ikhwan, like researching through the actual kutub, through the actual books themselves, ikhwan. And we know that everyone talks about the electronic versions of books, Allah barik fikum, but there's nothing, ikhwan, like pulling down that book. And by the way, ikhwan, and we knew this before, alhamdulillah, before they did these kinds of studies, but there are studies that suggest, ikhwan, that when a person actually studies from a kitab, from a book, a physical book, they've done those MRI scans on brains. And they notice, ikhwan, that when a person studies from an actual book, more of the brain lights up, more portions of the brain light up than if one is reading something electronically. Why? Because now with the book, ikhwan, you're using the bodily senses. Touch, the sense of touch, the texture of the book. So that fires off something in the brain. Even the hearing of the pages, the movement of the pages and the fingers on the pages, the sound that it creates, looking at the thing with the eyes, it creates, because you're using more of your brain, because of the different bodily senses that are involved in that, it actually fires more of the brain off, ikhwan barik fikum. And so therefore we see the great benefit in relying on kutub. Allah barik fikum. And I'm not saying that to say that one cannot benefit from electronic versions, but know for certainty, ikhwan, there's nothing like benefiting from a kitab, a book in one's hand. The Shaykh said after this, ikhwan, Shaykhuna Shaykh Muqbil rahimahullah, والفائدة الواحدة من الكتاب تساوي الدنيا عند الذي يعرف قدر العلم وعند من أصبح العلم أحب إليه من ماله وولده والناس أجمعين. Shaykhuna Shaykh Muqbil, he said what? One benefit found in a book, just one benefit that a person finds in a book is equal to the dunya. It is equal to the whole of the dunya for the one who knows the value of knowledge. And that's why Shaykh Hamad al-Ansari said that books were more beloved to him than the palaces of kings. That's why. Because one benefit from a book, as Shaykh Muqbil mentions here, he says, is equal to the dunya for the one who knows the value of knowledge. If a person doesn't know the value of knowledge, then they'll never understand. They'll never understand why being in the library is better than being in some fine palace or whatever it may be. They'll never understand if they don't have that love for knowledge and the appreciation for the value of knowledge. And for the one who has made knowledge more beloved to him than his wealth, his children, and all the people. That is the one, ikhwan barik fikum, who understands that one benefit that one finds in a book is equal to the whole of the dunya. And one never knows, ikhwan, what benefit may save your life. One never knows what piece of knowledge that you might learn, just one piece of knowledge that may benefit you. One of the noble companions said that he was about to go out to the battle of the camel with Aisha radiallahu anha. He remembered something he heard from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One narration he remembered that he heard, that no people who are led by a woman will succeed. And because of that, he remained at home. You never know what one piece of information that you may learn, what it may do for you. You have no idea what one benefit that you may learn in one of these books, ikhwan, what it may do for your life, how it may save you. As a noble companion he mentioned, radiallahu anhu. And the Shaykh, he said, بَقِيَ كَيْفْ يَسْتَفِيدْ مِنْ هَذِي الْكُتُبِ. There remains a question, how does one benefit from these books? وَهَذَا هُوَ الَّذِي يُهِمُّنَا. And this is what concerns us. كيف يستفيد من هذه الكتب? How does he benefit from these books? يستفيد أحسن استفادة بالممارسة وبالقراءة. He will benefit greatly from studying and reading these works. And then the Shaykh goes on to mention several different kinds of works. And I'm moving on for the sake of time. وطالب العلم المحب للعلم. So the student of knowledge who loves knowledge. والذي لديه غيره يستطيع أن يكتب ويستفيد من مكتبته الصغيرة. And the Shaykh, he says, so the student who loves knowledge and has a passion for knowledge, he can write a benefit and benefit even from a small library. Now we're not talking necessarily now about a maktaba dhahiri that Shaykh al-Albani benefited in, but the one who is diligent and loves knowledge, Shaykh Muqbil says, he can benefit even from a small library. Look what the Shaykh says. He says, قد كنت في مكة وكان عندي مكتبة في دولاب صغير من الخشب. He said, when I was in Mecca, I had a small library in a small cabinet, a small wooden cabinet. You imagine something like that maybe. A small wooden cabinet with books. But look what the Shaykh he says. He says, وَالْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ كَتَبْتْ التَّلِيعَةِ فِي الرَّدِّ عَلَى غُلَاةِ الشِّيعَةِ وَاللَّهُ الْمُسْتَعَانِ. He said, but from that small little cabinet of books, I was able to write that work at Tali'a في الرد على غلاة الشيعة. He was able to write that book, Ikhwan, in refutation of the extreme Shia. From a very small cabinet of books. Because the Shaykh, Ikhwan, Fikum, benefited from that which he had with him. فإن تيسر توفير الكتب فبها ونعمت. The Shaykh says, if it is possible to acquire books, it is a blessing and a favor. وإن لم يتيسر فينبغي أن تستفيد من مكتبتك الصغيرة. He said, but if it is not possible, then you should make the most of your small library. All right, one last bit. One last point, Ikhwan, from Sheikh Ibn Baz. I wanted to end on this. I didn't want to leave till I mentioned this, Ikhwan. So now the Sheikh talks about the most important books that should be in the library, Sheikh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala. And he starts, Ikhwan, by mentioning from the best books of Al-Aqidah. So let me ask the brothers here. So we're starting up with the library here, and we want to have the books of Aqidah. What's the first book of Aqidah? We're putting in the library. Kitab al-Tawheed, I heard. Usul al-Thalatha, I heard. Wasitiyya, I heard. Usul al-Sunnah, mashallah. Shaykh Ibn Baz says, أهم كتب العقيدة وأعظمها وأنفعها القرآن. Everybody skipped over the Quran. The Shaykh, he said, the most important, the greatest, and the most beneficial book of creed is the noble Quran. Shaykh Muqbil Ikhwan, rahimahullah, I remember this, Ikhwan, we were in the lesson one day and he asked the people, what is the best book on the subject of Tawheed? And the students did exactly what y'all would, and everybody was naming different books of Aqeedah, and the Shaykh says, what about Kitab Allah? And Ibn Qayyim says what? Ibn Qayyim says that every verse in the Quran establishes a Tawheed. Best book on the subject of Tawheed. So Ibn Baz says the most important, the greatest, and most beneficial book on creed is the noble Quran. هو أهم كتاب. It is the most important book. وأصدق كتاب, the most truthful book. وأعظم كتاب, the greatest book. وأشرف كتاب, and the noblest book. The Shaykh said after this, rahimahullah, فَعَلَيْكَ أَن تَعُضْ عَلَيْهِ بِالنَّوَاجِذِ, is upon you to hold firm upon the Quran. وَتُكْثِرْ مِن تِلَاوَتِهِ مِنْ أَوِّلِهِ إِلَىٰ آخِرِهِ. And he said, and it is upon you to recite it often from beginning to end. To recite the book of Allah often from beginning to end. فَكُلُّ عَقِيدَةٍ وَتَوْجِيهِ إِلَى كُلِّ خَيْرٍ وَتَحْذِيرٍ مِنْ كُلِّ شَرٍ. He says, all of it is creed, guidance to all good, and warning from all evil. So the Shaykh, he says, so read it with reflection, attention, and a desire for learning, and follow what it indicates in word, deed, and creed. You will find all goodness in it from beginning to end, from Al-Fatiha ila Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, unto An-Nas. Ta'ammal dhalika al-kitab al-azim. The Shaykh says, so contemplate that noble book, وَأَكْثِرْ مِن تِلَاوَتِهِ, and read it often, وَتَدَبَّرْ مَعَانِيهِ, and contemplate and ponder its meanings. فَفِيهِ بَيَانُ الْعَقِيدَةِ, because in it is the clarification of the creed. الَّتِي رَضِيَهَا اللَّهُ لَكَ وَرَضِيَهَا لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. For in it is the explanation of the creed that Allah is pleased with for you and for the believers. ثم بعد ذلك عليك بكتب الحديث الشريف كالصحيحين وغيرهما. And then it is upon you to study the works of al-hadith. Like he says, the two sahihs of al-Bukhari and Muslim and other than them. ثم كتب أهل العلم المعروفين. And then the works of the well-known scholars. Those who are known bil-ilm wal-fadl, those who are known for knowledge and virtue. Wal-aqeedah sahiha, an upright, correct creed. ككتب شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية, like the books of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. ومنها العقيدة الواسطية, so we know we need to have al-Wasitiyya in the library. والتدمرية والحموية ومنهاج السنة ومجموع الفتاوى So the Shaykh, he mentions several of the works of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, were also Kutub ibn al-Qayyim, and also the works of Ibn al-Qayyim. فهذه كتب طيبة مفيدة, because these are beneficial, good books. ومنها كتاب فتح المجيد, and from that ikhwan is Fath al-Majid, the explanation of Kitab al-Tawheed. وكتاب التوحيد also by Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, وكشف الشبهات, وثلاثة الأصول, and also كشف الشبهات and ثلاثة الأصول له أيضا, also by that noble Imam. And so ikhwan, and we had more, but we'll end here because the time is upon us. Allah yabarik fikum. But as for what we have learned and read tonight, ikhwan, we see the importance of building a library, an Islamic library, and we see the blessings of a library, and how those libraries, ikhwan, allow us to go and to read and to research and to benefit. And so therefore, ikhwan, from the blessings of this community is the establishment of the Ibn Qayyim Public Library. It is a tremendous idea, ikhwan. It is from the best of the services that the community can give to its people. And we hope to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah facilitates for you, ikhwan, the completion of this library. And do not be like those, ikhwan, who are heedless of this blessing that is before you. Take benefit from it, ikhwan. And don't be like those who we used to see, ikhwan, in some of the libraries. I remember we traveled to Canada years ago, and we went to one of the masajid up there that had a huge library. Somebody had dedicated hundreds and hundreds, thousands of books to this library. And we went into the library, ikhwan, and what you found, the people in there sitting around reading newspapers. Here you have Bukhari and Muslim and Sunan Abi Dawood and Kitab Tawheed and Tariq al-Islam. All of these works of Islam are around. You're surrounded by ilm and knowledge, and here you are reading the newspaper. Allah yabarik fikum. So take the opportunity, ikhwan, be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the free time that He blesses you with. Spend time in the library, take your children to the library, aid the library in whatever way you can, even if it is just giving ikhwan a small book to the library, paying for a small book for the library. And be from those ikhwan who aid this tremendous, tremendous project. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ikhwan, to facilitate it for this community and for all of us to benefit from it, whether in Newark or outside of Newark. وجزاكم الله خيرا.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.